We're going to be studying in this class Jewish Babylonian Aramaic. And because I don't want to spend too much time with introductions, because I prefer always to teach the languages and not to teach about languages. So I know you go to class sometimes, they tell you a lot about the language, and at the end you come out and you say, but I didn't learn the language. And I don't particularly like that method. And so what I'm going to do is predominantly, a little bit more water. Possibly? A little bit more? Yeah, I just thought it was full. So okay. I thought you might want some. So I'm going to be talking mainly about the phenomena of the language and not that much about what the language is. But briefly, what we're going to be studying is the language of the Babylonian Talmud. That's the main material that I'm going to be teaching you, is the language that appears in the Babylonian Talmud and to an extent in other texts written by rabbis, by Talmudic rabbis, after the Talmudic period, up until the year 1039, when Rav Hai Gaon died, and that is the end of this kind of Jewish Babylonian Aramaic. Because I don't want to discuss too much about the background, I won't go into too much detail about what kind of Aramaic this is. I would just say that one of the surprising things that characterizes the Jewish Babylonian Aramaic of the Talmud is how unconservative it is. That is to say, how much it reflects later developments of the Aramaic language. Now, the rabbis of the Talmud knew that there were different kinds of Aramaic, and they knew older types of Aramaic. And it's quite surprising that when we contrast the language of the Talmud to, for example, the language of Syriac, classical Syriac, which many of you have studied or will study at some point, classical Syriac remains very stable right up until 16th, 17th century. People are still trying to write in a very classical language. Even up to today, there are writers who are trying to write in this language. It's not they succeed, but the model for writing remains the classical language of the early period. The Babylonian Talmud is surprising because the model for writing is so not conservative. And there are questions: why would you write in a language that isn't a high literary language? Why would you write a text like that? The next issue is that we see that the older the manuscript is of the Talmud, the less archaic the language is. In other words, when we look at early manuscripts that come out of Eastern sources, mostly the Cairo Geniza, the collection of Jewish medieval manuscripts that was discovered in Cairo, but also some other manuscripts that were found in other places, we find that these manuscripts, rather than having an older type of language, actually have the less conservative type of language. And this suggests that originally, when the Talmud was written down, it was written down very much in a colloquial language, and that later copyists actually improved the language and made it more conservative and more understandable. And I'll come on to some examples today, so I'm not just talking and you have no idea what I'm talking about. Usually that's the case. But what I'm saying is that when we actually see the examples, you'll understand what I'm saying. That the older language is found in the later manuscripts. One of the problems we have is when I'm talking about older manuscripts and newer manuscripts, all of the manuscripts of Talmudic literature, all of the manuscripts of Talmudic literature date from around the 10th century onwards. And the Talmud is maybe put together from the 5th, 6th centuries until the early Middle Ages, 8th century. In other words, the Talmud is being edited together. And so the question is, to what extent do these early manuscripts reflect the language as it was really used in Babylonia in the Talmudic period? The only sources we have for the language of the Babylonian Aramaic language used by Jews from the medieval period, the only sources we have are the magic bowls. You may have seen these incantation bowls, clay bowls with spells written on them. I must emphasize that the amount of material of the bowls that has been published is much smaller than the amount of material that exists. And therefore, what I'm going to say is based on a much wider reading of this material than is possible for most scholars, because there's a lot of unpublished material. And what the bold texts show us, and these are from around about the 5th to the 7th centuries, these were copied, the actual material was copied. So they're, in many cases, 500 years, 400 years earlier than the manuscripts of the Talmud. And they come, if I'm speaking too fast, just stop me. And they come from Babylonia. They weren't copied, they weren't found in Cairo. So we know these were written by native speakers at the time when the language was still being used. And from those texts we see that in that period too, there was a high literary language and there was a much lower register, a more colloquial language. And some of the bold texts are written in the high language, and a few of them are composed in a very spoken type of language, but very often the ones that are written in the high language contain so-called errors that reflect the low language, which is natural. People writing, and they're supposed to write in some archaic language, they don't know how to do so because their education maybe isn't so good, and they slip into their writing forms of the spoken language. And in most cases we can establish that these are forms of the spoken language because these agree with the material that we find in those early manuscripts. In other words, the phenomena that we discuss, the things we will talk about that characterize the early manuscripts, which are much more colloquial, are also found in the slips in the bowls. And therefore what we're talking about is a circumstance, a situation where we have at the same time a high literary language and a lower language, and most of the Talmud is written in the lower language, and the earlier we go back in the manuscripts, the less they're written in the high literary language, which sounds absurd because it sounds like it should be the other way, but when we understand what happened to Talmudic literature, maybe we can understand why this is. Because the Talmud was originally written for people in Babylonia. And then, as it left Babylonia, it became less comprehensible, less understandable, and therefore people tried to sort of improve the language and make it more understandable. So we'll begin. So what we're going to do is we're going to start a little bit with phonology. I'm not going to drive you too mad with the very finer details of the sound system, because if we start dealing with that, we won't be able to ever learn any of the language. But we'll start with a little bit. Now, I actually have a page with all of this written in English for you. And the question is this: how am I going to get this material to you? Email. I was thinking maybe about making a little website or something, or Gmail thing, but I'm not quite sure how we're going to do this. This is my real question, because I have grammar sheets and I have all kinds of materials and I can put it onto PDF. The question is then how do I get it to you? So we'll have to solve that one sort of today. So because I think printing it out for everybody will be a lot of printing, although maybe that's possible. I see nobody has laptops, so that idea, with you today. But what I have for you is summaries of the grammar, and I have for you texts, and I have for you various tables of verbs and things like that. So if we can find a way to deal with that, and we'll talk about that a little later, then I think that would be very helpful for us, because then what I write on the board is often inaccurate, and what I write in the pages is slightly less inaccurate. So let's talk about the main phenomena that characterize Babylonian. I'd just like to ask, is there anyone here who doesn't know the Hebrew script at all? Hebrew print? No. Excellent. Does everybody know the Hebrew handwriting? Okay, so I will write in something approximating Hebrew handwriting. If you can't understand my writing, don't be disturbed, because my Israeli students can't understand it either. Okay, the most significant phenomenon. We're starting with number one, which is what we call the elision of word final. Maybe it's the end of the word final phonemes. In other words, it's what we call the phenomenon, and now I don't know if anyone remembers who she is, Brigitte Bardot. Okay, we call it the Brigitte Bardot phenomenon, where she's not called Bardot, she's called Bardot because we don't pronounce the end of. I have to admit, my father taught me that term because in his generation, Brigitte Bardot was the one you remembered. I think she's a little less well preserved these days, but in his day when he was studying, it was known as the Brigitte Bardot phenomenon because you don't pronounce the T at the end of her name. So in Babylonian Aramaic we find, and this is important, we find that several phonemes, sounds at the ends of the words are not pronounced. And again, the earlier the manuscript, the more we find this. And those phonemes that are lost are, and you're going to learn this. I'm going to say, why is this? And you'll say, Vavlam Narth. They are the, be, ve, vav, lam, narth. So I'm going to say to you, what's happened to end the consonant at the end of the word, and you're going to say to me, Vavlam Narth. Okay, until you hate Vavlam Narth, or me, whichever comes first. So, a few examples that, we'll start with the. We have the. In Babylonian Aramaic, and this is also used in modern Hebrew, a lot of these examples I bring you, I deliberately choose the ones that sort of made their way into modern Hebrew. We have the word bichdi. In modern Hebrew, that means without reason. Without reason. But it comes from the word bichdiv, in falsehood. Because kadhiv, like kazav or kadhaba in Arabic, is falsehood. So bichdiv becomes bichdiv. The bet, the final v, has been elided. In the Talmud, we find. We also have an expression in modern Hebrew, which comes from the Talmud. The V'tula. Israelis say the V'tulo, they're wrong, but it's V'tula. What is tu? Tu is the word tu. Tav vav bet. And it's the same as the Hebrew word shuv, meaning again. It's etymological. We didn't discuss the consonant shifts. We'll come back to that. But bet. Some things are so obvious to you in your teaching that you forget that you need to teach them. I apologize. We'll come back to that afterwards. So, bet. In the Talmud, the printed editions of the Talmud, we find the expression Nashak Ruha. Ruha is like Ruach in Hebrew, or Ruh in Arabic, spirit, wind. And Nashak is from the root Nun Shin Bet, Nashav, to blow. We have this also in Hebrew. Why did this survive when other examples didn't survive? I think it's because the copies read it as Nasa, as the Hebrew root. And therefore they didn't realise it was not Nashav. From Nashav Ruha, a wind blew. And this appears in the Talmud like this, with the Aleph at the end, Nashav, instead of Nashav. And the last example I'm going to bring to you is an example that only appears in the early Eastern manuscripts. Maybe in some magic bowls, but it doesn't appear in the printed versions of the Talmud at all. And that is the form Yud Tav T, which is from Yativ, he sat. Don't ask about the hard ta. That's how it's vocalized in the manuscript. Those who know Neo-Aramaic will know that also in Neo-Aramaic this root has been lexicalized with the t and not the. T, Yativ. So this example, to sit, he sat, and you'll have all of this on your sheet. This example appears only in the early manuscripts. And it's a phonetic phenomenon. It's something that comes out of the spoken language, that people didn't pronounce the consonants at the ends of the words. But it's interesting that the earlier manuscripts have these more phonetic forms, the more authentic Babylonian forms. The later manuscripts don't. And the reason for that is unclear. I have my beliefs and others have wrong beliefs. Now, that's the. Those are quite common even in the printed editions of the Talmud. The next one we're going to discuss is the, which is the D rafa, the fricative D, sorry.
The rafa?
The rafa, yeah. I told you I was going to get chalk dust on everything. This is very rare in the printed editions of the Talmud if it appears at all, but in the manuscripts, we find in modern Hebrew, this enters modern Hebrew b'diavad, which is after the fact. This appears in Talmudic manuscripts as b'diavad, in which we've not only the ayin is not pronounced, but also the dalet at the end, b'diavad. And this appears in several sources. It's not a single manuscript, it's not a scribal error. In fact, there's even a manuscript from the Geniza, which is quite interesting, where the scribe has written b'diavad, a later scribe has come along and crossed it out and written b'diavad with the ayin and dalet above the line. And this implies to me that this is the process that we're seeing in later transmissions, where rare phonetic forms are being taken out for the more common historical forms, because they're easier to understand. For those who are researchers into Babylonian Aramaic, the phonetic forms are the exciting ones. They're the ones that show us how people are really speaking. If you're trying to read the language and you can't understand it, the older forms are much more transparent, because you have here the ayin and you have here the dalet, and I know the root is ayin bet dalet. Here I have no idea what this word is unless I know what it means. Which I have to know a lot of Aramaic. So that's vav, that's the dalet. There's also an example, and I don't know if you'll like this one. We have here this nun yod bet yod. Hello and welcome. Neve, which is another nasty example, because this is from nun ayin bet yod dalet. Neve. What shall we do? The root is ayin bet dalet again, to do. Nun prefix for us, like in Hebrew, we shall, or in Arabic, naktub, or nishmol in Hebrew. Nevi, what shall we do? And this appears in the manuscripts like this. So in fact, the root ayin bet dalet acted in many cases like aleph bet yod. And in fact, in the magic bowls, we have spellings. And in the early Talmudic manuscripts, aleph bet yod for ayin bet dalet. There was a text that Dan Levine and Siam Bahayro published a few years ago, and it has these aleph bet dalet yod in it, avi, for ayin. It also appears in Talmudic manuscripts. Again, to what extent do these phenomena reflect in the writing of the language or not? That's a difficult question, but as we read in text, we will come across them. So we did vav, and now lamed. So lamed is el. We've done that one, and we've done that. Now this one, el. If I knew how to connect this thing into like a projector, we could probably actually do it if I were really clever. I know how to do it in my university, but I don't know, because it hasn't got the right cable for me. So blue disappears quite a lot. Again, this phenomenon is found in the magic bowl texts. So we have in Talmudic manuscripts aleph zayin aleph azah, which is azal, which in Aramaic means he went. Azal. If you think of the little goat, you remember the goat who goes to Azazel? So he's the Ez Azel. Obviously Ez is feminine, but he's the walking goat, you see. Ez Azel. So Azel. We have from the same root, Z. Zayin Yod, which is the imperative form, which is Z in the printed editions of the Talmud. We have the imperative Zil, go, Zil Gmor, Idach Zil Gmor, and in the many Talmudic manuscripts, early ones, it appears as Z. I want to stress that what I'm telling you is they're not, certain things I'm telling you, they're very rare. Other ones are actually quite common in the early manuscripts. And that is why, I'm not going to go into this too much, the early manuscripts really are better than the later editions. As we like to say, not all manuscripts were created equal. Z. We have in the root Kuf Bet Lamed. But we have, I apologize for my terrible handwriting. I should really have listened more in school when they taught us to write. Qabbil is qabil, to receive or take. Qabil. Okay, I'll come on to the ER a little bit later. Generally, the short E remains E in Babylonian Aramaic. The example I brought of Neviv is because Avad basically operates like a Lamed Aleph, a Pei Aleph verb, first Aleph verb, and therefore there's evidence for that it's A and not E. But Qabbi, sorry, that's Qabbi is from Qabbi, received, Qabbi. Shaqi, he takes, is from Shaqil. Shaqil. In Aramaic, the root shaqal does not mean to weigh in Hebrew. That's taqal. That's its cognate. Shaqil is like in Ugaritic and other Semitic languages, it means to take. To take.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Qabil, what is the form?
It's a perfect. Qabil, he received. Qabbi.
You mean it's your...
The lamed is... It's the pa. It's Qabel. Kibel in Hebrew. Kibel in Hebrew. Perfect.
No. In Aramaic, Qabel.
Yeah, but in your Aramaic. Okay. In the early...
How do you know it is E?
How do I know? I know it from two sources. So this is again bringing us to the question of how do we research this language. We have it in two places. We have it both in the earliest manuscript of rabbinic literature, one of the two earliest manuscripts of rabbinic literature, which was known as Halachot Sukkot manuscript Sasson, and then when the National Library didn't buy it, which was a disastrous mistake, it went to Friedberg, and it's now known as the Friedberg manuscript, which isn't such a bad thing because he's fortunately a generous collector who has supported a lot of important projects, but it's one of the most important manuscripts of rabbinic literature. There are two complete or lengthy codices that are dated before around the 10th century from Babylonia. One of them is Vatican manuscript number 66, which contains a Talmudic work known as Sifra, and the other is the Halachot Psukot manuscript of Sasson. And these were the two early Babylonian, fantastic, phenomenal manuscripts. And one of them came up for sale. The Vatican one will not come up for sale, obviously.
Are they pointed?
Yes, so Halachot Psukot Sasson has the bottom 5 lines or so. I can show you the photographs. Are pointed. I can tell you, as all good scholars do, they put the manuscript online. I remember I was in Berlin and I saw the manuscript, I went through every page and downloaded it, just in case it wouldn't be there anymore. And one page is not accessible because there's a computing error, and to this day I haven't managed to get that page. But Halachot Psukot Sasson has very early vocalization, and we have a book that was written in the Middle Ages called An Introduction to the Talmud, something like Al-Madkhal al-Ulum al-Talmud of Rabbi Shmuel ben Hofni Gaon, and he discusses the vocalization of certain words, and he agrees with Halachot Psukot Sasson. In Arabic, yeah. He says, what he does is very interesting. He says, he has the pair, this pair of words, and he says of this one, مع شوي تحت النون وحريق تحت الحد نزل, with a shva here, it's nazal, yarad, and مع فتح تحت النون, with a nahid وحريق here, it's yanzal. So he actually, because they're homographs, he actually tells you how to vocalize them. And there are other places where he actually gives the vocalization in words. In words. So it's clear this is how, he uses the terms, patach and chirik, but I think, to me, that's good evidence that he pronounced it as we find it in the vocalized manuscripts. Now, obviously, there may have been different types of Aramaic, and we adopt one tradition or one way of reading it. But considering there's a lot of support for that in the earliest manuscripts and in contemporary evidence, I don't see any reason to doubt it. Others disagree. When it comes to a debate between Rav Shmuel ben Hofniger on Aramaic speaker living in Babylonia and others, I go with Rav Shmuel ben Hofniger on. That's, call me old-fashioned. So that's why I vocalize always with the Hirik, and I follow the vocalization more or less of Halachot Psukot and some other early Babylonian manuscripts that are survived in the Geniza. Okay.
Is this manuscript open to public?
Yes, you can find it. If you look at Friedberg, Halachot Psukot, you can see the whole manuscript online. I mean, I said, this is why I said it's not such a bad thing that Friedberg bought it, because he's a genuinely interested collector who has funded the entire research into the Geniza and ancient manuscripts. So if somebody was going to buy it, somebody who is entirely the most generous benefactor of Hebrew manuscript studies in the 20th and 21st centuries, is probably a good guy to buy it. It could have fallen into worse hands, let's put it like that. There's no underestimating the amount that this man has personally contributed to the study of ancient Hebrew manuscripts.
One more question.
Yes.
How long it is? I mean,
It's 300.
How wide is this text?
It's about, the Halachot Psukot song contains 320 something pages. Not all are vocalized, and not every line is vocalized. But there's a sufficient amount of material that it's fair to say that we can learn the phonology. And Shlomo Morag wrote an article, an excellent article, that was published in either Leshanenu or Talbitz in 1971, I think, on the vocalization of the manuscript. As long as you read that part of the article and not the stuff about the Yemenites, it's an excellent article.
All the references are to be found in your book.
In my book where it was written. Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't repeat what Morag had written, but I happen to regard that as one of his best articles on Babylonian Aramaic. I think it's an excellent article. A few minor mistakes, but that's irrelevant. That's an excellent article. So we had Lamed. Sharqi and the Lamed is bis, and again we find this in the magic bowl text. I found Shku, Nishku without the Lamed. I found all of these things in the bowl text, Zil, Z, etc. We find them all. Now we come to Mem. Now we come to M. So we've done La. Tick. Now we do M. And this is extremely common also in the printed editions. In the root, the verbal root, kuf, vav, me, pum. I'll come back to this in a minute. So for example, we have the participle form, well, the modern Hebrew's present tense form. What in Targum Onkelos, or in biblical Aramaic, would be qa'im, stands, participle, you look puzzled, or pained. Oh, I know why, of course, I'm so sorry. How dare I vocalize Targum Onkelos with Tiberian vocalization? Now I understand, of course. Okay, qa'im, okay, I hope that's much better. Now, suddenly I realize my embarrassing error what kind of a scholar are you to use Tiberian vocalization for Targum uncles? You go, ha'im. For, I'm vocalizing everything with the Tiberian because it's easier for you, I'm assuming. So, this appears in early manuscripts and it's printed out like this. Ha'i. This example is vocalized in Halachot Psukot Sasson. It's actually vocalized in the manuscript like this. Huf Aleph Ha'i. We'll come on to the issue of the R and the E and the Chamatz and Patach afterwards. Or for those who are less familiar with the Babylonian vocalization, Ha'i. Here you have the chilek. Here you have it, you see? And the mem has fallen off. What will be extremely familiar to speakers of modern Hebrew, particularly sports fans, is the expression tiku. Admittedly in modern Hebrew they pronounce it teku, which means let it stand. Tiku. Feminine, let her, it. Feminine, singular, stand. And this has lost the meh at the end. Tikum, let it stand. Azoi. We have some other examples, I don't need to go into all of them. Now, so we've done meh. And the most common example is this one, which in the printed editions is written Huf Aleph Yod Kai. So the opening line of the Babylonian Talmud says Tanya Hechikai Kidkatani Ushokbachaukumecha. The opening line of the Babylonian Talmud, the first page of the Babylonian Talmud, even in the printed editions, has this word on it. So this isn't some strange phenomenon that I found in some old manuscript and you say, well, nobody wrote like this. This is extremely common in all texts, but the more you go back to the early manuscripts, the more you will find examples. The interesting thing is that the Geonim, the heads of the academies in the 10th, 11th centuries, start using the old form again, ha'im with a mem. But that's the literary form. They're writing, and they use the literary form in their writings. These texts were probably transmitted originally orally, and they tend to use more the non-literary forms. So that's mem. Now we go on to nun. Nun is very common in all texts because all of the participle plurals, right, we have in Hebrew, kotev, kotevet, kotvim, kotvot, right? Kotev, kotevet, kotvim, kotvot. In Aramaic, kotev, kotva, kotvim, kotvan. Yes. Kotev, kotva, kotvim, kotvan. And what in Targum Onkelos would be kotvim. Kothavin in Babylonian Aramaic would be this. Katvi. Katvi. With patach and without the shva. Without the shva. So much so, I can't even begin to tell you how important this is. Because we see this in classical Syriac. For example, the root azal in classical Syriac, you have azil. I've written it in Hebrew characters for those who don't say azil, which is clear that the lamed, there was no shva here, because otherwise this phenomenon wouldn't happen. I've written about the forms kabbin instead of kafvin in the magic bowls, where we find the tav is not written, it's been assimilated. I've also written about the forms in Talmudic manuscripts and in Neo-Mandaic, qallin, which is from qa'azlin. Qallin, maqsud thought it was from the root alal, it's not from the root alal, I'm here, this is for the experts in the audience. It's from the root azal. Because you have qazi and the plural is qallin. And qazi comes from qa'azil with the loss of the lamed, and qallin comes from qa'azlin. And this is found in 3 or 4 early manuscripts. The alinan instead of azlinan. I've written about this, so anyone who wants, yes?
It's a question aside a little. How would you explain this patach here?
I believe that in the Babylonian, this has been written about quite extensively. Morag believed that the kamatz shifted to in certain circumstances. Boyarin, when he was writing about linguistics and wrote some very good things, said no, in fact the O and the R are allophones. I think that Boyarin was correct and wrong. I think that Babylonian Aramaic, I'll come on to this afterwards, had two R vowels, one short and one long, and those two vowels had two allophones. They had O and O, and as I say, A and short A and O, and long A and O, which was influenced by the phonetic surroundings and sometimes the vocalization by classicism. But it's all over Babylonian Aramaic, it's all over Eastern Aramaic. And in fact, Khezi's article, I mentioned today that Khezi Safi published an article in Tzete Nge not long ago about the Neo-Aramaic verb forms, and one day I'll sit down, I shouldn't record this because now you can all go and write the article, to show that basically it's the same as what happened in Babylonian Aramaic. So that where you have the closed syllables you have A, and where you have the open syllables you have O. We have the stress. It's very interesting. Khezi Musafi wrote about it. No photos, you steal my soul. Oh no, my soul has just been stolen. Anyway, so we have the nun here disappearing. This is very common in the printed editions of the Talmud. All over the place. We have Azli and not Azli. All over the place. What we don't have, the other one we have a lot in the Talmud is we have the personal pronoun Aleph Tava. I'm talking about the printed editions of the Talmud, not an old manuscript. You go to the library and you look at a book and you'll see it printed there. Atu instead of Atun, for you, Yars in good English. You plural, Atun. We'll learn about these afterwards. I know you're bewildered, but it's not so complicated, because what we'll do is just keep coming back and doing it again and again and again until you know it. I don't take prisoners, all right? We don't take prisoners in this class. You will know it. Sie werden sprechen. Atum. What is rare is in the verbal stems. So this was a plural form, and this was a pronoun. What is rare is that the verbal roots disappear, and that we have. We're talking about nun. We have, for example, I've got here Zabbi. Sorry, Zabbi. And I don't remember if this is the participle. Oh, he buys. Zavin. Zavin. It's the participle. So it should be like kativ or any participle. It should have the third root letter. Kotev. It doesn't have it. And this is attested. So now we've done nun. Whoopee! We're doing well, aren't we? Nun. Now we have r. Ra. And the resh, as you know, is one of the soft letters. It's lost in a lot of places. Already in the Dead Sea Scrolls we have evidence that they didn't pronounce the resh. And in the Tiberian tradition it does not receive the dagesh. So Ra is often Ra, however they pronounced it. I don't know, I wasn't there. It was a soft letter, and Resh is lost very commonly in the root Amar, to say. And here we have an interesting distinction between again between the printed editions and the manuscripts. In the printed editions of the Talmud, the resh is lost in the root amar in the imperfect forms. For example, tema, instead of temar, you shall say. The chi tema for temar, the yod instead of the aleph, temar. Or imperative, ima. And you're going to ask me how do I know it's ima? Because Rav Shmuel ben Hofni Gaon says مع نقطة واحدة تحت النون قول مع نقطتين تحت الألف أقول مع نقطة واحدة تحت الألف قول. He says it in this matter as in all others. Rav Shmuel ben Hofni Gaon's introduction to the Talmud is clear and understandable. Ima, imperative. emor in Hebrew, or emar in Aramaic. If you want, if you want to be Tiberian about this, don't go being Tiberian on me. Okay, emar. So, iman. So these are very common, the imperfect and the imperative. In the printed edition of the Talmud, anyone learning Talmud will know these. What they won't know is the past tense, amar, amar for amar. This is extremely common in early Eastern manuscripts. We also find spellings like Amalei, he said to him as one word. It's extremely common. Amalei. But, and here we have a problem with the copying of the Talmud, because sometimes they'll add a little note as though it's an abbreviation. But it's not clear it always was an abbreviation. Maybe the scribes thought it was an abbreviation, but we have a lot of texts where they don't have the little thing, and so it seems in fact it was just the way they pronounced it. Amalei, as one word. So that was ah. Finally we come to th, and th is lost, to the best of my, since th only appears at the ends of words. It's very rare at the end of words, because there are very few roots that end with th. I have found it only in the verbal endings of the first person, and here we'll come to Targum Onkelos again. In Targum Onkelos, the form for I said, or I wrote, is just dyslexia. Try again. You realise all scholars of language is dyslexic. This is basically a problem. In Targum Onkelos Kathavith, in Babylonian Aramaic, Kathavi, I wrote. Probably Kathavi here. Kathavi. And this is the standard form of the first person in Babylonian Aramaic, Talmudic Aramaic. Qabbili, I received. Ashbahi, I improved. In all of the binyanim, all of the verbal stems, we have E instead of eth. Now, you immediately jump up and say, but wait a minute. About 5 minutes ago, you told us that this is the participle, kathvi. And now you're telling us that it's kathavi. That's, they write, and this is I wrote. And the answer is it's both. Depending on the context, we will vocalize it as the plural participle, kathvi, or as the past tense, kthari. I believe that they were distinguished in the pronunciation. And I have good reason for believing that, because I'm very clever. People ask me, how do you know? How do you know? I say, because I'm just very clever and I know things. It's a matter of gathering evidence from lots and lots of sources. Sometimes they wrote the ah, because although historically it was short, it was stress lengthened, and so sometimes you have it. Kathri. So the other one is forms like nafaqa. She went out, which comes from nafaqath in Targum Onkelos language. She went out in Targum Onkelos language would be nafaqat. In biblical Aramaic, nifqath or nifqath. But in the language, in Syriac, nifqath. In Babylonian Aramaic, in Targum Onkelos, nafaqath. It's my job to know these things, okay? Palestinian Aramaic, nafqath. So we've done a very important thing. We said vet, be, we'll run back very quickly through some examples. Be, ve, is in vetu, la, vetuv. Ve, we said, is very rare in the printed editions of the Talmud. It occurs in the root avav, which was pronounced ava. Vav, l, azah, zi, go, qabbi, for qabil, to receive, shaqi. The mem, m, we said we have qa'i, very, very common. Tiqu, very common in the Talmud. Nun, n, kathri, all the participle endings. And not all of them, but most of the Talmud don't have the n ending. They have e ending. Okay, musical accompaniment. This is very dramatic, you see. Life has incidental music and the dramatic moments.
Why these consonants, not others?
They're all kind of fricative and sonorant.
What?
They're all mostly fricative or sonorant. They're they're slightly voiced. Is exceptional. We said from ema, tema, very common, and the third only in the verbal endings. So that is very significant in Babylonian Aramaic for all word formation, because any time we come across a word, we have to say to ourselves, has a bit fallen off the end? And again, the question is this: why, at what stage in the writing of a language do you say, I am not going to write the ra at the end of amar, because I don't pronounce it anymore? So it's a sort of socio-linguistic question. Did they know that it was from amar? Of course they knew it was from amar, because they had older Aramaic texts, they had Targum Onkelos, they had Hebrew. They knew that this root was amar, and later they had Arabic, amara, which admittedly has another meaning, but they knew these were connected. They knew they were connected. So why would you not write it? And if you don't pronounce the l in qabil, why did you decide there I'm going to write it, and here mostly I'm going to write it, and occasionally I just leave it off, but in amar I'm never going to write it. It's partly the frequency, the transparency of the word. How obvious is it that this is amar and not amar? And other reasons that we just don't know, because we can't go back and ask them. So I don't have the answer. So don't ask the question. They say there are no bad questions, but that's a bad question because I don't have the answer. Only ask me questions that I can answer, okay? It's a very important rule. And then you get 100%. Okay, so that was... Oh, I just noticed something really horrible happened to my file. I don't know how that happened. The U, R, and E became capitalized. I will change that when I give it to you. Just like, well, I didn't give it to you, because you said, why does he use capital U, R, and E? Okay, so now we come to the second part, which is much shorter, you'll be pleased to hear, because the first part was Vavlam Narth, right? Vavlam Narth. And the second part is just U, R, E. So it's much, much easier, U, R, E. Any questions? Yes? Hang on, I'm going to erase this, I'm going to come over and give you a question.
Dus we don't pronounce them at all, or in some cases?
Well, that's the question. The question is, why was it sometimes they wrote them and sometimes they didn't? Did they always not pronounce them the way that we wrote them? Like in French, where we have these old-fashioned spellings, where they're still writing all these letters they're not pronouncing anymore because 700 years ago they pronounced them? Or were there different dialects? I don't even have an answer, because what is confusing is you'll have a text where one time they were writing and the next time in the same text. So my suspicion is they weren't pronouncing them most of the time, and when you find them, that's sort of an old-fashioned spelling. But maybe I'm going very wrong. We also have the magic old text, we'll have two copies, and one will have a more kind of formal spelling, older spelling, and one will have a less formal spelling. So my suspicion is that the language hiding underneath the writing had changed a great deal. But they mostly try to maintain, or very frequently try to maintain the old spelling. So that's the question I said. The question we need to ask is not, why do we have archaic spellings, but why isn't the Talmud written in all archaic spellings? That's the strange question to me. Why is it when they have all the forms of language, why don't they use them like they use the classical Syriac? I don't have an answer. Maybe because it was originally not a written text. Originally it was an oral text. And by the time they came to write it down, they more or less had a fixed formulation for it. No, I say more or less, all with variations, but people had a way of reciting this text, and therefore they didn't change it when they wrote it down. What I wrote my first research on was about when they cited the text in the Middle Ages, and they also wrote it down, is there a difference between the citations from the Talmud and the Aramaic of the heads in the academics writing? And there is. But they use the phonetic, more popular forms for the Talmud, and then when they come to write their own things, they use the more formal language. But they were already writing. They were already writing these explanations. And so what I think is they had a kind of way of learning the text that was oral, but when they actually wrote themselves, they tended to use the more formal written language. So I don't know if that answers your question, but okay, let's return here. That's a nice desk, isn't it? I think I'll get one of these. Maybe I'll put it in my case and take it back with me. We're now on to the vowels. U, R, E, which is very easy to remember because there's only 3 of them. U, R, E. And U, R, and E. And I'm marking them as long because presumably etymologically they're long, but in order for them to fall off, they probably were unstressed, and therefore they shortened, and therefore eventually they were elided. So when I put them U, R, E, we can put a little star. Asterisk, the goal, and there we go. So this is going to be quite important to us. The first story is we have the form yati, which means they sat. They sat. Now we should have, as in Hebrew and as in Old Aramaic and as in Arabic, we should have the long u ending, yathibu. But there are many examples where this does not appear, where the u does not appear. And there was once a discussion about whether it happens like in Arabic, that before the subject is used as the singular. That's not the case. They then found examples where it appears after the subject. So it's not the Arabic story at all. It's simply phonological. The u at the end was not pronounced. Now in classical Syriac we have the same thing. But in classical Syriac they were always, in theory, I say in theory, right. Why do I say in theory? Because when you look at the manuscripts, if you look at the critical edition of Pshita, I think it was once in Kings, in 8b, whatever it is, of Kings. In fact, there are lots of examples where they didn't write it. So we are used to learning classical Syriac from the classical model, but when you actually, I don't know if you've encountered any, when you actually look at how people were writing, they often just didn't write them. But then the more modern editors who read Nernica would put them back in, because Nernica says it's supposed to have the u there, and so they choose from the manuscript edition, they would choose the one that fits Nernica. You know this phenomenon. This is absolutely true. But what happened is when the classical grammars were written, the later editors of text would choose out of the manuscripts the one that fitted what they believed the language should be. And it wasn't always the earliest reading and the best manuscript. So it's quite clear that already in Syriac they weren't pronouncing it, often not writing the vav for u, because they weren't pronouncing it, but the standard orthography of classical Syriac has it, and so modern editors felt they ought to add it in or take it from a manuscript that had it. That's one example. Azal is another example. From Azal, they went. Azal, they went. So these are quite common, that the u disappears. However, before pronominal suffixes, before object suffix, these two examples don't have it. But for example, if I had shkal, he took, they took, before the object would always be shaklu, they took it, because it's not word final. shaklu. Probably it was also stressed differently, because this was shkalu and this was shaklu. In other words, originally you had shakalu, put a short one, shkalu, where the u was elided, but shaklu, and even if they didn't pronounce the hey at the end, and there's evidence to suggest they didn't always pronounce this, it would still remain shaklu, because the emphasis was probably here, the stress, sorry. Shaklu. In classical Mandaic, when they don't pronounce it, they have the u. That's the sign. Okay, so that's that example. U. Sometimes at the imperfects, shkulu, they have shkul, and we'll come back to this phenomenon later because it will explain other things. We've done that one. Now no expense has been spared on the equipment budget. I'm glad to know there's still a ready supply of chalk in Ukraine. I was worrying the world's chalk supply was running out, so it'd be necessary to go over to plastic pens, but I'm glad to see that here there's a ready supply of chalk for another 2 generations. Okay, shkalu. And this is, yes, nach nafshe. There's an expression that appears quite frequently in the Talmud, nach nafshe. His soul rested. However, soul is feminine. It's feminine. So in Targum Onkelos, it would be nachaf. Either with kamatz or patach here, certain interchange there. So what happened? Nachaf nafshe. What happened to the third? Vavlam north. So from naha, it became naha. Open syllable has kamatz. And then, because the stress is here, naha became nah. So we've come 2 stages away from the original form, nach nafshe. His soul rested. Another example, I hope you've all been studying Targum Onkelos really, really, really well. Because if we take that root shkal again, or ta, let's take ta. Ktavu, they wrote. Ktavu, they wrote. How do you say they wrote him? Ktavu, he. This is the same in biblical Aramaic. Ktavu, he. How do you say they wrote her? In Targum, Ktavu, ha. So the difference between him and her in these verbs is the difference in he and ha. The cowboy, he ha, right? He and ha. However, what did we say? The final vowels drop. And therefore in Babylonian Aramaic, both of these are katavu. There's no distinction between him and her. There was a distinction between men and women in Babylonia, and that's why the Jews of Babylonia continued to have children, because there actually was a difference. But I always say this about people about gender, and say, well, in Persian, modern Persian has no gender distinction, but somehow the Iranians still manage to reproduce. So the language does not always reflect your society or anything. It's just reflects itself. So shaklu. So here we saw that ha and he have been lost. I promise you, it will get easier. And it will get more difficult. This is very technical, this is very boring, right? Yes? It gets more interesting. We have to learn the boring stuff to be able to do the exciting stuff afterwards, which is reading text. Shaklu v'shakli. So, we've done R and E now. Brilliant. So now let's go to E. A couple more examples of E. E. In the Talmud, Amara v'prone amore, Amara li in. In. What is in? My mother. It's from immi, my mother. And the E ending has been elided. We have a number of words like this. We have in Babylonian yad, and we have yon, dav, that your dove will precede mine. This is mafrihei yona, according to Talmud Masachet Sanhedrin. Yad, yon, brat. Brat is my daughter, because it's brati. I don't like to say, because I have a teenage daughter, that it's word brat in English, because that would be very rude to say that. But it's Yad, Yon, and Brat, my daughter. Im, my mother. Bir appears once in the Talmud, my son. Fabri. Din garba de asira abir. In a slightly archaic, slightly strange dialectal form. Appears in Masechet Brachot. So we have a number of words where the E ending has been lost. This is not, we'll come to this afterwards, this is not the standard form of the possessive pronoun for first person in Babylonian Aramaic. But it does occur. In classical Syriac, has anyone studied classical Syriac here? Yes? So in classical Syriac they write the yod and they don't pronounce it. So they would write the dalad. I'm not very good at my classical Syriac writing. Yod, and then they have a little daladi thing, and then they would have a yod thing here, and that would be yadi. Don't learn classical Syriac handwriting from me because mine is terrible. I just read too much Mandaic, and it's Mandaic I can write. I can read it, but I don't write. So we have that in classical Syriac. We have also, I forgot, the imperative forms. There's another example where we have things like shkul, again, take, for feminine. Shkul instead of shkuli, for feminine. So, with the U-R-E, the most common is, of course, the plural forms, because that's the most common place where we have U at the end of the word, ktavu, azalu. The R occurs quite frequently in the third person feminines. She wrote ktav instead of ktavo. That's quite common. The pronoun doesn't use the R of shakluha to the point where I'm even not sure it really existed in the dialect at all. The few examples that we have in manuscripts could come from Talmud language, could be outside influence. It's so rare. Maybe they still use it occasionally in archaic writings, but it's not common. It's not the regular form. I think I may have a list out of all of the Talmudic manuscripts I've looked at, 3-4 examples, as opposed to dozens of examples where the third person feminine pronoun is used. And in the E, it's common in another place. Yes, I just remember it's not on the list. Very important one. Very important one. I'll add it into the file. We have it in the word im, brat, the pronouns, the imperative, shkul instead of shkuli, which we have in all the Semitic languages. I deliberately try to bring you examples that if you don't know Aramaic, you'll know from Hebrew, you'll know from Arabic, you'll know from Classical Syriac, you'll know from somewhere else. The last one, which I forgot to write on my list, and I will add it in before I somehow get it to you, is... I'm doing time, I'm doing well for time. I'm doing good. Superman does good, we're doing well. Now, the last one is that the ani ending, which you'll all know from Hebrew, shmarani, he protected me, or kadvani in Aramaic, becomes an. The ani ending becomes an. So, he saw me, Hazyani, he saw me. Instead of Hazyani, or in Kagumokros, Hazani. I have to know these things. Hazani. The famous one I teach my students is this one, Rahman al-Itzlan, which is Harahman, the merciful one. The Lamed is the third person prefix. Lipros, for those who study Akkadian. Litzlan, Yatzileni. May the merciful one save me. Most people think it's us. That is incorrect, because the pronoun for us is Inan. If it was Rahman Yatzilenu, it would be Rahmana Litzlina. So that is incorrect. This is a very famous film. This is the one I teach my students because they know the expression, they just don't know what it means. Like all good Israelis. I will now come back and teach you what I should have taught you at the beginning. Being extremely bad teacher. As I said, I just forgot that you didn't know it. Now you know it. I was going to come on to the other phonological features, but before we get on to the other phonological features, it's on the sheet I prepared for you, so you don't have to worry if I forgot to teach it on a different sheet, that's why. My Hebrew is Moshe, and there's Torah Moshe Shebichtav, right, the written law, and Torah Moshe Shebal Peh. And it's well known that in my case, Torah Moshe Shebal Peh is more authoritative, if less extensive, than Torah Moshe Shebal Peh. There's a big difference. One of these is authoritative, the other is more extensive, but is somewhat apocryphal. Occasionally, it is questionable. So, what I say to you is the more extensive than what I write, but it's less reliable. So you have to decide. This is why it's hard to come to conclusions from what I say. We didn't do the interchanges, right? But who here has studied any kind of Aramaic? No, one at a time, please. It's too many. No. Yes.
Just started.
You just started. With Seven. Who's teaching? Are you teaching it or? Anochi. Okay, Modev Ozev. Yeruham. So, did you do about the sound interchanges between Hebrew and Arabic and... Okay, so I'll do it now. So, what the secret is, there are some other sounds that anyone who knows Arabic, other phonemes that anyone who knows Arabic knows, and they disappeared in Hebrew and Aramaic because they merged with other ones. So, let's just think of some examples. We have the old phoneme the, which in Arabic gives us dhahaba, dhahab. I'm writing in Arabic for those who know Arabic. Actually, for those who know Arabic, I won't help you because you won't be able to read it. Dhahab, in Hebrew, zahab, and in Aramaic, dehab. Dehab. Right? And then we have the vol, which is, for example, Arabic qayz, extreme heat. Qayz. And in Hebrew, qayt, summer, and in Aramaic, qayt. Kabur min ibri qayt, says in the book of Daniel. Like the chaff from the threshing houses of the summer. And then we have the other sound, which we don't know how to write, because we write it as a l or a h or whatever, this one, or however you want to write it, was the vav. However you wish to write it. I'm not fussy, and that gives us in Arabic od, and in Hebrew eretz. and in Aramaic, Ara, and I'm writing deliberately in the older Aramaic, okay? Without the article at the end, or so-called article, the unmarked forms, or marked forms, whichever one you want to call them, because in fact they're the unmarked forms in Babylonian Aramaic, whereas in Aramaic they're the marked forms. And finally, third, right? Third, which gives us in Arabic, for example, thalath, in Hebrew, shalosh, and in Aramaic, older Aramaic, tloth. Azoi. So, the problem comes that when we're learning Aramaic, if we're coming to Aramaic from another language, another Semitic language, we have to be aware, because these phonemes have merged with other phonemes. They've merged with other phonemes. What does that mean? If we find d in Aramaic, it may be real d, or it may be the historically, which is equivalent to z in Aramaic, in Hebrew. It's a bit complicated. If we have p in Aramaic, it may be real text. It may be really a text that all its life has been a text. It didn't undergo a kind of conversion from some other phoneme or way. Or it might be this what? It's pretty rare. Pretty rare. There aren't that many examples. Tehare, povia, meaning a deer. Tehara, meaning afternoon. Dhuhr in Arabic. Sohraim in Hebrew. It's not that common. We don't have that many of them. This is quite a bit more common. We have a bob, which gives us sadi in Hebrew and ayn in Aramaic. There are quite a number of those. For example, an, son, sheepies, sheep in Hebrew, bon in Arabic, son. And others. Ara is the common one. Eretz. Aq, tzok. We have quite a few of them. Baq in Arabic. And th is also quite common. That's why I said that we don't, if we have shakal in Hebrew, shakal, to weigh, that's shakal in Aramaic with a kaf. But we also have in Aramaic the real shakal, which is from the real historical sh. So that didn't disappear. It's complicated. Have you done this at all? Anybody before? Anyone who's taking it in parallel another kind of Aramaic will hear this until they're bored of it, until it becomes really easy for them. Did anyone study Arabic here? A little bit. Right? Just wait. And so, anyone who studied Arabic, it's also quite obvious. And if you, بس بشوي يعني قليل. لا. ولا كلمة. Class Arabic. Okay. Sorry? A bit. Okay. So I'll have to speak to you only in classical Arabic. That'll be quite tough. For me, because I'm not clever enough. So, those are the interchanges. They will be on the sheet you will somehow get. So don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. How are we doing? What time are we supposed to finish? 1:30? 1:30 is good. Okay. So now we'll come on to some other phonological features, some other exciting sound changes. And I'm mentioning all the boring stuff at the beginning, because this really is the boring stuff. This is it's like when you go to art school. Not that I've ever been to art school. When I come to draw on the board for you, you will realise that I gave up my career in art in order to teach Aramaic, and what a terrible loss that was to the art world. But, you know, in art school they make them draw these really boring things, and they all want to be great artists. And they say, well, no, actually you really need to learn how to sort of do the stuff before you can go off and become a great artist. I don't know if it's true that you do need to know that, but that's what they tell them. So, the next features are, first of all, we'll look at this. The first thing you notice is that here we have zohav in Hebrew, and here we have dehav. So the first thing that happens is that the short vowels, all become the shva, in open, unstressed syllables. So there's a lot more shvas there in Aramaic than there will be in Hebrew. And in classical Arabic, they're just preserved. so you don't have to worry about that. That's why classical Arabic is such an easy language, right? I recall that I studied classical Arabic at the Hebrew University, and it was taught in Hebrew, of course. So you come along and they teach you the letters, and they say, you start with bait, and they say bait. In Arabic it's a house. So, oh, that's bait. In Hebrew this is really easy. Okay, fine. So then they teach you the zait, and that means oil. It doesn't mean olive. Like you say, okay, so it's like olive oil. So I can remember that one, that's really easy. And they give you some others like that. And then they suddenly say, okay, now read this sentence. وصل وزير الفجير المصري للبلاد اليوم لاجتماعات مع مطبعه من البلاد. وقال توصل. Well, excuse me, you told me it was going to be bait and zait. And you've thrown all these other words at me that I've never seen in my life. So it turns out it's a little bit more complicated than they trick you into thinking in the first few lessons. And by then you've already taken like half 6 weeks of Arabic, learning the alphabet, and you can't go back on it. You have to finish. So they trick you. Don't believe it. So I'm telling you it's really easy. So the shva is very, very, very common.
Classical Syriac is easier
Than this?
than classical Arabic.
Yes, it is. Classical Syriac is easier. And that's why I do more classical Syriac than I do Arabic, because it's too difficult for me to do Arabic. I never managed to master it. Anyway, the next one is that the short E vowels, as in all of the Aramaic dialects, are... So the first thing you said is there are lots of shvas there. And now, the short E vowel... Here, I'll write it for you. The short E vowel becomes R before H, Ain, or R. And this I will repeat to you until you know it, because we have lots of examples. Now, in modern Hebrew, there's an expression which comes from the Talmud, tarte mashma. And I always ask my students, what does tarte mashma mean? And they say, it means it has two meanings. And I say, but that's not the literal meaning, because it's actually a little sentence. Tarte is two, and mashma is participle of, it should be mashmi. In Hebrew, mashmiya. It's the af'il participle. Mashmiya, like in Hebrew, mashmiya. But why isn't it mashmiya? Because of the ayn, so it's mashma. So this is actually the object of this. And that's sometimes we're playing Chopin. Yeah, it's like that. This is Chopin, isn't it? If I remember correctly. Am I right? Otherwise you're going to have it on video. He's an idiot. This is why I gave up my musical career too. There's actually a photograph of me in the school play from school when I was 10 years old, playing Moshe. I was Moses and I have a staff. And standing next to me is Aaron. And Aaron today is the head of Baroque music at the Royal Academy of Music in London. So there's this photograph of us, Moses and Aaron, and he's one of the leading experts in Baroque music, and nothing ever came of me, so it's very sad. Moses was kaved pe, whereas he was very eloquent. So he was very eloquent, that's why he's head of the department of Royal Academy of Music. Anyway, so we have, for example, if we had the root before, kabir, he received, the root to send is shabda. So this was kabir. He received, but this he sent was shabda. da. And this has become a because of the r here. But we said they didn't pronounce the r. It doesn't make any difference. It's mostly still, the effects are historical. So it's mostly still there, even where they're not pronouncing the final consonant. Now, because of this problem, we sometimes have a problem with certain forms. So for example, if we have the spelling here, this spelling can be the past tense, savar, he thought, or he held the opinion, or he knew. Or it can be savar, he thinks. In some cases, in the early manuscripts, the scribes will be nice and they'll add the aleph here to tell us that that's savar and that one is savar. Certain periods of manuscripts they did this. It's quite interesting. And then it kind of disappeared in a certain period. Very uncommon in halachot psukot sasson, very common in Gaonic texts. Other Gaonic texts in the high Shreya Gaon use this a lot. Probably under the influence of Arabic. Probably under the influence of Arabic they did it. Because they also wrote in Arabic a lot. Whereas in other texts that have less Arabic influence, you don't find it that much. So it shows us how they pronounced it. The third thing I wanted to tell you about this, which we've already mentioned, is that the long R remained R and didn't become O. And so we often find it's written with a patah sign and not with a kamat sign. However, it seems that there was a distinction between long R and short R, which in the onkelos would be distinguished between the patah and the kamats. Here, it's distinguished both in the orthography, that they will use the aleph to represent long R and they will never use it to represent short R, except for a very few words where it probably was lengthened. And we have pairs. For example,
you want to say that patah denotes long R?
No, the patah can denote either. The signs, I tell you what, in my opinion, very briefly, and I ought to have written this up one day, I should do so. In my opinion, what happened is that the signs were invented for the Bible and for Targum Onkelos. They used for Targum Onkelos, the Babylonian vocalization signs. And so they represent the phonology of Babylonian, Hebrew and early Aramaic. But the pronunciation of Babylonian spoken colloquial was not the same. And so they weren't really suited for that. They didn't, in the early vocalization, they didn't have signs. Oh, this thing is going to eat me. Go away. In the early, well, it did. In the early texts, they didn't have signs for the short and long vowels. Later they developed them in the Babylonian tradition. They actually have a sign for short vowel. So what they did is they just used them for the vowel quality. Vowel quality. So at the end of a word, almost always, in most texts, you will find they will use the kamat sign, or, which is exactly what you find in Neo-Mandaic, where the a is or at the end of a word. But this one was tanyo. So this was tanyo, which was pronounced tanyo, and that is it teaches, it feminine singular teaches. But tanyo it was taught. That's the passive participle. So in fact, there's a phonological difference between the long A and the short A. Go away. And the very last point I wanted to make about the phonology, and look at that, we've exactly come to an hour and a half. Ding. The very last point I would make is that we do find the air vowel Rarely, we find it as lengthening for a dagesh that is lost, as we have in Hebrew. So, for example, we have mehacho. In Halachot Sukkot, Sachon manuscript, we have the form me-ha-cho. From here. Ha-cho is here, and it should be mi-ha-cho with a dagesh, but in fact me-ha-cho doesn't matter. Now, I realise that you probably haven't understood much of what I've said today. Because when you start learning a new language, it is quite normal not to understand anything. I'll tell them the story I told you today. 25 years ago, I wanted to study biblical Aramaic. And so I sat down for a week, a whole week, 7 days, or maybe 6 days, and rested on the 7th, I can't recall. I sat down with Franz Rosenthal's Grammar of Biblical Aramaic, which is a book that contains something like 70 pages. So all I needed to read was 10 pages a day. Wasn't that much, considering I knew English quite well. And I read the book, 10 pages a day, and after a week I put the book down. I said, I didn't understand anything. I have no idea what that book was talking about. I couldn't understand a word. So, it takes a little bit of practice. You have to just keep going over it. And what we've discussed today are the very basic rules of what we can expect to find when we look at a Babylonian text. Very, very basic. Of the main changes of the sounds that we'll find when we look at the Babylonian texts. So tomorrow, what we will do is we'll start looking a little bit about the structure of the language, how words are put together. Particularly, we will start with the verbal system, what the verbal structures are. Anyone who studied classical Syriac will know this. And we will look at a little bit about some of the pronouns, the I, you, he, she words, and we'll learn a few of them because they're very, very important, much more important in Babylonian Aramaic than they are in other dialects, early dialects of Aramaic, because they enter the verb system. The question I have for you is how are we going to deal with getting you the materials? I mean, I can go back and I can make a Google Documents and I can put the documents into there. Maybe what I'll do is I will send you the link, and can you send it to the participants? How does that work?
Sorry.
If I make a document and I send you the links, can you send it to the part? You have the list of the. Yeah, and then I have to send it to somebody who will then send it to.
Maybe if you will write out the mail.
Yeah, but I won't have time to be able to put in everyone's mail. That's the problem. I mean, how can we do it?
We can write our emails and pass it to somebody.
Yeah, but then somebody's going to have to. The question is, who is going to sit down and put in everyone's email and just like? I mean, maybe somebody has the list already and they don't need to type all the emails in. You understand the problem? If we have to sit down and type everyone's email, then we're never going to do this. Realistically.